Good afternoon, students. Thanks for those that are joining in live and those that are watching asynchronously. We are at session 4 of our student financial wellness workshops, and we're going to expand more on last week's topic of personal spending plans and working with budgets. And today's topic is making savings a habit. And with that, I'll give the floor to CJ.
Great. Thanks, Maria. So exciting because this is about saving and investing. So some of you have said you're interested a little bit about in that investing piece. And so we're going to start off with some stock market trivia. So when we talk about the big board, does anybody know what that is? You can pop that in the chat box or shout it out. But what is the big board? I always like to give you this trivia right before the weekend so that you've got barbecue conversations. All right. Well, it is the nickname of the New York Stock Exchange. So the New York Stock Exchange is the first and most popular stock exchange in the world. And it opened for the first time in 1792. Well, I'm going to check and see if any of you are poker players, because my next question is, why are some companies known as blue chip? You can come clean if you're a poker player. All right. Well, this prestigious nickname is reserved for companies that are nationally known and trade high on the stock market. The name is derived from the highest value poker chip, which happens to be the blue chip. So up until about 15 years ago, the blue chip stocks really didn't change. And then, well, maybe we're probably 20 years. Now, with the NASDAQ coming in, all of a sudden we've got a change up on some of those stocks. But for the most part, they stay pretty stable. Today, the top 5 are American Express, Apple, Disney, Home Depot, and Johnson & Johnson. So again, those are solid blue chip stocks that always seem to be riding a little bit on the high side, which is great. So I want to remind you again that our purpose today is twofold. One is for you to feel comfortable in your own personal financial skin, and for you to then figure out how you could, with curiosity, have a conversation with students and certainly peers and obviously family and friends. Because as we mentioned when we first met, no one talks about money. And so let's really start the conversation. Well, we took a look at the psychology of money, and we took a look at spending and financial planning. And today it's all about saving and investing. We're going to look at some very important money management concepts and strategies that you can share. But before we begin, I'm going to encourage you to just spend a moment thinking about, how do you feel about saving and investing? Because remember, our money history and our money attitude plays a huge factor in our relationship with money. So since everyone's history is different, even within the family, maybe for some of us, we learned how to save early on. And that was our big deal. I'm going to share with you my story. I loved saving, and I had a piggy bank. And I insisted that my mom take me to the bank at least twice a month. Now, remember, this is a piggy bank, and I'm like 5 or 6. So it wasn't like hundreds of dollars. That was a lot of pennies. I did get a small allowance, and I saved a lot of it. But I loved going to the bank. And just because I am that old school, we used to get a written passbook. I would take my passbook in, and then they would write in how much interest, and they'd write my balance, and I loved seeing that money grow. Well, one Saturday, my mother said to me, "Hey, would you like to meet the bank president?" Well, this is a small town, small community, so of course she knew the bank president, and I said yes. And he was a very, very tall. His name was Mr. Stringfellow. We used to call him String Bean because he was as tall as a string bean, and I was a little person. So he was very gracious. He knelt down to have eye contact with me. And then he offered me the key to the world, which was, I like to see the vault? Well, of course I did, because what was going to be in the vault? My money, all my pennies, or so I thought. Into the vault we went, whereupon I then had, according to my mother, an absolute meltdown because there was no space that had my name on it. I was looking for my name in a little box with all my money in it. I really didn't understand that the bank took my money and then lent it out to anyone. And then when I did hear that, I was devastated because I wanted all my pennies to be in one place. It took me a while before I could really grasp all of what was going on. But I got back to saving, and I was a big saver for a long part of my life. So think about how you feel about saving. Well, let's take a look at what today is all about, because we have a jam-packed hour to spend together. Get this to behave. So our learning objectives are to differentiate between saving and investing. We sometimes use those terms interchangeably, and we really need to understand the difference. We're also going to explain the purpose of PYF. We're going to discuss the significance of time value of money. We're also going to explore how personal risk tolerance relates to investment decision making. We're going to start off with who wants to be a millionaire? Well, I guess the question is who doesn't? Emotional barriers, saving and investing, PYF, emergency funds, compound versus simple, and risk and reward. So our various first piece of the puzzle is who wants to be a millionaire? And Maria's going to pop in our questionnaire into the chat box. And if you can access that, great. I'm also going to pull it up on my screen. There are simply 10 true or false questions. So we aren't going to spend a lot of time pulling this together, but let me pull that up for you. And if you're going to be using the screen, that's great. I will go ahead and squinch it up a little bit. So you're simply reading the statements and determining is it true or false. So I'll leave it there for just a moment if you're using the screen, and then I'll move it up slightly. As I say, there are a total of 10, and then we'll figure out just exactly who wants to be a millionaire based on their score. So just a couple minutes. And I apologize, number 4 has a typo, which I keep forgetting to correct. So it's really 40 hours per week, not 40 years per week. Must have been a Freudian slip in my workaholic days. I'm going to go ahead and go down a few, see if we can't get all 10. Give it another second here on number 4 in case you weren't there yet. And now I'm going to move to number 10, and that's the last one of the quiz. Give it about 30 more seconds and then we'll pull together and see how we did. All right, so let's check in. The first question is, a millionaire is someone who has a yearly income of $1 million or more. Anybody want to say true or false? The answer is false, thankfully, because a millionaire is actually someone who has a net worth of $1 million or more. So we don't have to be making that kind of money yearly in order to be a millionaire. The next question is, 80% of millionaires inherited their money. True or false? Well, we can't blame our parents anymore. because only 19% of millionaires were given any money or wealth from families. So apparently, no longer can, as I say, blame mom and dad for not leaving us a lot of money. Approximately 2/3 of millionaires are self-employed. Absolutely true. 75% of millionaires are self-employed and consider themselves to be entrepreneurs. Because of their wealth, most millionaires work less than 40 hours per week. Not so fast. It's false. Most millionaires work 45 to 50 hours per week. And as many of us know, if you're a true entrepreneur, you're probably working 60 to 70 hours per week. Number 5, most millionaires are college graduates. Yes, it's true. So one more reason to stay in school. 80% are college grads, 24% have earned master's or doctoral degrees, and 14% have earned medical or law degrees. Number 6, more millionaires carry an American Express Gold card than a credit card from Sears. And we know Sears is on its way out, but when this material was gathered a few years ago, it was still alive and well. So what do we think? The answer is false. Only 28.6% of millionaires have an American Express Gold card, while 43% have a Sears card. Number 7, single people are often millionaires more than married people. Absolutely false. Millionaires tend to be married and stay married. Now, I know recently there have been some millionaires or billionaires like Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates, so they don't quite fit into this, but apparently they're more the exception than the rule. Number 8, the majority of millionaires drive a current model of a luxury import car. False. Only 23% of millionaires drive a current year car. So just think about that, just a current year car. So all those clunkers you see out on the road, 10, 15, they could be being driven by a millionaire. 9.4% drive a Ford and only 8.8% drive a Cadillac. Number 9, most millionaires work in glamorous jobs such as sports, entertainment, or high tech. No, false. Most millionaires work in very ordinary jobs. They are paving contractors or have a pest control business. Who would think? And the last one, many poor people become millionaires by winning the lottery. Nope, that's a false. The odds of winning 1 million or more in a lottery is about 1 in 12 million. And the odds of a woman giving birth to quadruplets is 1 in 700,000. So not so fast with that lotto ticket. Every now and then I like to say, oh my gosh, I'd love to win the lottery. And then I realize, oh, I haven't bought a ticket. So there's a little bit of a disconnect there. So anyone surprised by these particular answers? This is a great activity to do with family and friends and with students, because I think, at least I, early on, would have answered many of these, believing that millionaires really do inherit their wealth, or that they do carry an American Express card, or they do drive a fancy car, but not so fast. Quite frankly, the real secret to being a millionaire: live within your income. Better yet, live below your income. Well, if you enjoyed this quiz and you're interested in learning more about millionaires, these are 2 books that are really worth the read: The Millionaire Mind and The Millionaire Next Door, both by Thomas Stanley, PhD. They're quick reads. They've got great anecdotal material. And it's just fun to understand that there really are opportunities, quite frankly, for each of us to be a millionaire. And that's something that's within each of our reaches. And I know that sounds a little Pollyanna, like, oh, sure. But the these two REITs would say, oh, absolutely. Um, it's a manner of managing what you have. And so again, I want to hit home the idea that we're not out here to make you a millionaire, but we want to be able to share with you techniques and tips and tricks to manage what you do have. And it's very possible that you could be a millionaire. Well, let's think about why there are barriers to saving and investing, because there quite frankly are. And you might be surprised to discover that there are numerous barriers. We have 4 barriers that are emotion based. The first one is risk tolerance. Well, we all have a certain level of risk, which we're comfortable with. That's our risk tolerance. And there are many factors that come to play with risk tolerance: age, gender, income, financial goals, etc. So it's not an easy peasy kind of thing to figure out. But it is important that for most of the time, we make decisions based on the level of risk tolerance we already have. However, sometimes it may be beneficial to take risks with which we are not necessarily comfortable. Those are prudent risks. So again, if your gut suggests, yeah, I don't think I'm going to buy any Bitcoin, I don't know about that, I'm going to encourage you to listen carefully. On the other hand, your gut might say, yeah, let's go for it, I can handle that risk. Well, then by all means. But do know your risk tolerance. Another barrier is the now versus future focus. So one of the major reasons that people may not save or invest as much as they should is that we live in that now society. Some of us like to call it the microwavable society. You know, all of a sudden you can get a meal in 3 seconds of being zapped. We like things to happen quickly, and we often change course if we don't get immediate results. Think about the pandemic and how Amazon has spoiled us. You just can click it, submit, and sometimes it's there in a day. But at the very latest, if you have Amazon Prime, it's there in 2 days. Who would have thought? Saving and investing are best practice with a long-term outlook. So just like it's easy putting off the dishes or mowing the lawn, it's easy to put off saving and investing. Oh, I'll get to it someday, or I don't have enough to save at the moment. But we'll see in just a moment that the sooner you establish a savings and investment habit, the better off you'll be. So keep in mind, again, the actual amount you start saving isn't as important as the fact that you start. So if you can save $5 a week, great. If you could only save $2 a week, great. If you can save $100 a week, wow. But again, it's the habit. That's what we're talking about here. It takes 21 times to create a new habit. So it isn't as easy as just saying, yeah, I'm going to save $1 every week, because it's going to take you 21 times, 21 weeks before you go, absolutely, not even think about it. There's my dollar. Then we've got procrastination. So sometimes we just are overwhelmed, or we feel like, yeah, I don't really know enough about investing. I don't really know enough about finances, and sometimes we feel intimidated because there's so much out there and we're not really sure where to start. So I'll get to it. I'll just put it off till later. But there's so much information available on the internet and at your local bank or credit union. It really isn't a good excuse anymore. What's our 4th emotional barrier? Choice. Now, the last barrier is one that many people don't even recognize as a barrier. I mean, don't you think choice is a good thing? I love having a lot of choice. But when you think about it, the human mind can only compare 2 things at once. So if I have a plethora of choices, I might just go, wow, I've got emotional paralysis. I can't even figure it out. There are too many choices. So that's a really big one. For example, if your goal is to save for a house, then we want to check out tools that would help you get there. And we can narrow it down to thinking, well, it might be mutual funds. If your goal is to save for a car, then probably a savings account or a certificate of deposit would be the right way to go. So focusing on just one goal at a time could really help us move forward. Let's talk about saving, and then we'll talk about investing so we can really understand the difference. As I mentioned, there's a lot of confusion about those words because sometimes we say things like, I'm going to invest in a new car. Well, that's not really true because when you invest, it's about having that asset appreciate. And when you invest in a new car, as many of you are aware, that brand new car, drive it off the lot, just a block, and you've lost $3,000 off the value of the car, depreciation. So we want to make sure we understand the terms. Saving means putting aside money in a low risk option for short-term goals. It provides access to money quickly and easily with little or no risk that you'll lose what you put aside. It's usually for those, as I mentioned, short-term goals. And again, the amount you save is more important than what you earn on your money or your return. It's also about that ability to get to your money quickly. So we call that liquidity, because you can go to your ATM and take money out of your savings 24/7. Can't do that if you bought some stock. So it's just an opportunity for you to be thinking, do I need the money in an emergency or can it sit around and gain some more interest? Well, investing on the opposite side of the coin means putting money into assets that have historically have earned a higher rate of return than common savings products. I honestly can't tell you. I think probably your savings accounts are getting about a 0.05%, whereas obviously your stocks are getting a higher. But it involves risks, and again, access to those funds may be slow. If you have wanting to sell your stock, you certainly can't do it after 5 o'clock on a Friday because the markets are closed. So you have to wait the whole weekend and then start the paperwork on Monday. And then maybe you might get a check in 10 days. Nothing wrong with that. But again, I want to just share with you the time sensitivity of that. So let me just stop for a moment. I want to make sure that we are all on the same space. Questions so far? Am I going too fast or is the rate okay? Give me a thumbs up, thumbs down if you can, so I can just see what's going on with everybody today. Got a thumbs up? All right. Perfect. Well, then I'm going to move on, keeping at this pace. So one of the questions that I often get asked is, why do either save or invest? I mean, last week we talked about spending, so I'm happy with that. Well, there are some very specific reasons that we should save and invest. The first one is to stay ahead of inflation. So we know that inflation causes the increase in prices. So when your favorite fast food burger goes from $2.50 to $3, or when gas goes from $3 to $3.99 a gallon, we say that's inflation. And you need to make more money just to keep up with the rising cost of living. Because if you're still just where you were a year ago, the prices have gone up. We can't afford what we used to be able to. We also talk about an emergency fund. We know, sadly, that many of us were caught with our proverbial pants down with the pandemic. No one knew a pandemic was coming. So how could we figure out we needed to really up our ante with our emergency fund? And we'll talk more about that. But that's one of the reasons to save or invest. And really the primary financial goal is to have financial stability. So if we have proper financial planning, then we can achieve our financial goal. We can be stable. But financial planning is the process of setting financial goals, developing a plan to achieve those goals, and then putting your plan into action. The nice thing about having a financial plan is that most people who do usually live comfortably within their means and don't have to worry about having enough money for the things they need and want. Well, how does somebody get started? Because I'd like to be having that financial stability. I'd like financial freedom. I'd like financial flexibility. Well, the first step is setting aside money for savings. Um, and that really is deciding that it's possible to do so. A lot of people say, I want to save, CJ, but I just can't. I'm living paycheck to paycheck. Well, we talked last week about some spending leaks. So maybe you found some that you can take some of those pennies and put them into the saving piece. But the real secret is to being able to pay yourself first. So you need to establish saving as a priority. That's what it means. Taking care of you first, paying yourself first. It also means you can encourage sound financial habits when you pay yourself first. And you can build a cash buffer with real world applications. Well, maybe I've sold you on the idea of paying yourself first, but you're still saying to yourself, yeah, sounds great. But again, sounds a little bit easier than I think I can make it happen. Well, there are some actual tools. So remember, it's not the amount that counts. Making savings a fixed expense. Remember, that was one of our line items on our budget last week. And just creating that savings habit. Well, there are some other ideas for you, and that is that it may be that there's an opportunity for a payroll deduction. Not everybody does that anymore, but certainly if you have a savings account and a checking account, you can have an automatic electronic funds transfer. I do that, and it helps me build my savings up because that money just moves right out of that account. The minute I get paid, goes right over into my savings account. Now you can pick the day of week, you can pick the amount. So you're still in the driver's seat for that. Now this is a little tongue in cheek because most of us probably don't have any checks lying around, but you might as well use them. So write yourself a check, be that first person to use that. And now most of us can actually just use our phones and our computer phones, take a picture of the front and back, and it goes right into our checking account. So you can use up all that paper. Maybe you're a person that likes to see things a little more visually. So you can do the savings jar or an envelope. Lots of people use envelopes for budgeting. They literally have their envelopes up on the refrigerator, and they've got savings, they've got rent, they've got groceries. And the great thing is that once the cash is out of that envelope, it's a real eye opener. So it's one of the ways for you to manage your money, but make sure that you've got that savings jar or you've got that envelope if you want to do it that way. And I know you're thinking, wow, you're not really going to tell us to put it under your mattress, are you? I don't care where you put it, but start putting it somewhere. Obviously, I'd prefer that you put it into a financial services institution because it will be insured and protected. But the real point is, can you start putting some away? So I want you to be thinking about how you can find that spending leak. I don't care if it's a couple dollars because you're not going to Starbucks every day, or maybe you're not doing lunch out twice a week, but start helping yourself out and look at the difference it makes in your savings account. Well, now we need to get to that really scary topic, which happens to be the emergency fund. So actually, one of the reasons, if you recall, for starting a savings account or investing was to create an emergency fund. So creating an emergency fund should be really your very first goal. An emergency fund is money set aside in a bank account for unexpected expenses or for living expenses, for unexpected events like losing your job, the pandemic. Now, we used to say that the rule of thumb was that you needed 6 months of your living expenses in your emergency fund. That can be overwhelming if you haven't started, and it looks like it's a goal you can't achieve. Interestingly enough, Susie Orman, many of you may know of her. She is a financial guru. Whether you like her or not doesn't matter to me. But she said during the pandemic that we should all have 12 months. I'm not a fan of Susie Orman, quite frankly, and I'm not a fan of saying to somebody, look, you need to have an emergency fund of 12 months before you start saving for your dreams. I don't know that I can do that. So I'm going to backpedal and say, let's go with 3 months. Let's stick to a plan to get 3 months of our living expenses in the bank. So Maria's going to put a worksheet. I'm going to encourage you to do the worksheet in the privacy of your own space, and probably with a defibrillator nearby, because I think some of you might have a small heart attack when you discover what it is that we're talking about that you need to start storing away. So I'm going to bring mine up here, because what we want to make sure of is that we're just doing the calculations. So what's your grocery bill for 1 month? Then multiply it by 3. What are your utilities? Water included. What about rent or mortgage? Maybe you have a car payment or and gas, or maybe you have a bus or light rail fare for 1 month. And then put all your other debts together. Maybe it's a credit card, maybe it's a cell phone bill, maybe it's cable TV. And then add up all of this and get your total amount you're going to need in your emergency fund. As I say, do that when you have some breathing space, but I do encourage you to sit down and calculate the amount, because what we want to absolutely do is make sure we are setting aside some money. We're not going to get there quickly, but we need to get there. Let's be clear, though, that our emergency fund is different from our savings account. They're both going to be in a bank or a credit union, but your other savings should be used for a special purchase, a financial goal, a trip, graduate school, whatever you want it to be. It is separate from the emergency fund. Why? Because if we're dipping into our savings and that's the only account we have, then when the emergency comes, we won't have the money we need. So emergency fund, and the minute you have to use that emergency fund for maybe a furnace that goes out, or unfortunately an illness that you're not prepared for, then you start again replenishing your emergency fund and let your dreams just sit for a moment. I hope that makes sense to everybody, because what we want to do is use our money in our emergency fund instead of using our credit cards or taking a personal loan out. So we want to save it up so that we have that particular opportunity. Well, let's go on a little bit and have some fun, because I'm interested in which of these you might choose to do. And this is another great activity to do with family and friends. But if I offered you $500,000 that you could take today and invest at one time at a set interest rate, and let's just say, I don't know, let's go 8 to 10%. Would you take me up on that offer? Or would you rather that I gave you a penny and promised to double it every day for a month? I'd love to have you put in the chat box which one you'd take, just A or B. Do a quick straw poll of that. Give you a moment to think about it. Which would you pick, A or B? I've got somebody with B, okay. Another B. Well, you two must be friends with Albert Einstein, because this is exactly what you get if you do B. You started out with a penny, you keep going. Bada bing, bada bing, bada bing. Oh, wow. Look at day 30. That's a beautiful thing. Well, how did that happen? Well, according to Einstein, he says it's the greatest mathematical discovery of all time. So if you're interested, let's see what we're talking about. Yeah, a little play on words. I couldn't help myself. But there is such a thing as simple versus compound interest. And while we may not see the simple interest calculation very often these days, it may be coming back sooner than we think, but we need to be prepared to understand it. So simple interest is calculated on the original principal or the original deposit only. Compound interest is calculated each period on the original deposit or principal and all the interest that you accumulated during the previous months. Now, I wish I could tell you I could get you a savings account where you got 10%. I can't do it, but it's a nice, easy way to use this mathematical example. So you'll notice that with both simple and compound interest, the first year we're running neck and neck, 110, 110. But then start to begin to see the difference, and it doesn't look like much, but at the end, after 5 years, we've only made a little bit we made $10 every year, and we've increased using compound interest much more than that. So you can see, doesn't look like a lot, but we didn't put in a lot. So think about the fact that if you had a little bit more money in, you might see that a little bit more to your liking. So it's important to find a good interest rate, obviously, so that you can be making more on your return. Well, how do you do that? Well, one of the ways is the rule of 72. And so some of you may have heard of the rule of 72. Bankers love to talk about it, but it's very simple. There's no secret here. So with the rule of 72, you can estimate the growth of your funds over time with compound interest. You simply take the number 72, divide it by the interest rate you hope to earn, and that number gives you the approximate number of years it will take for your investment to double. So you can look at the chart right here, and gosh, if all we can get is 2% return, 36 years, that's a long time. But if I can find something closer to the 6 or 8, that's not too bad, but I'd love to get 12%. But this is an easy way for you to be comparing interest rates that are offered for various savings instruments, as well as through various financial institutions, because we certainly want to be able to get the most on our return with the littlest risk for most of us. Well, let's continue, because one of the things that we need to pay attention to is time. So let's look at these two individuals. Let's say that they just graduated from 4 years of college, and Janice starts saving at 22. Maybe she got $2,000 as a graduation gift. And she says to herself, I'm going to do this. I'm going to save $2,000 every year. And she finds an IRA or a Roth, and it's at the 12%. So she happily puts in $2,000 a year for 6 years. And then life happens. Maybe she gets married, moves out, and she just doesn't seem to pay attention to that $2,000 a year. But while she's not depositing, her money is still growing. So at age 65, she's got $1 million. Now, her friend Matt wanted to enjoy life after college, like many of us do. So he said, I'm going to take my $2,000 graduation gift and I'm going to go travel. Or I'm going to move to another part of the country. But then at age 28, he thought, wow, I probably ought to settle down and do something. Pardon me. So he puts in $2,000 a year. But he has to keep doing that for 37 years to get close, just a few dollars less than Janice did. But again, Janice only invested $12,000 for the first 6 years. Matt had to invest $74,000 to get the same amount in the end. So the earlier or longer you save, the more savings you will have. Hope that got your interest, because again, if you haven't been saving yet, now's the time to start, never too late. So let's take a look at the big 5 financial risks because we need to know they're out there. The first one is market risk. So yes, the price of stocks and bonds and mutual funds and real estate and gold and other investment assets, they rise and fall due to the economy or investor sentiment or political events or changing interest rates or changes in the fortunes of the companies or industries or other factors. In fact, all investment assets fluctuate to some extent. So this is the type of risk that most people associate with investing. I'm not sure what the market's going to do. Then there's the financial risk. And that means that maybe the companies can go bankrupt. We certainly, unfortunately, saw a number of companies across the country close during the pandemic. So if you've invested in a company that goes bankrupt, you will likely not get all or maybe any of your money back. We've hit on the next one a little bit about that inflation risk. So again, inflation basically means that the receipt of $1 tomorrow is worth less than receipt of $1 today. Ronald Reagan liked to say that inflation was a silent thief that over time could rob your savings of significant buying power. So it means that you don't earn enough on your money to keep pace with the amount that costs of goods and services are rising. You're essentially losing money because your money doesn't buy as much as it did when you invested. Then there's the interest rate risk. This is a little bit more complicated concept, but maybe this example will help. So if you buy a municipal bond, let's say it's a school bond to build a new school, that pays 5% per year for 10 years. Well, if you hold the bond for 10 years at simple interest, you'll get your 5% payment each year and the full $10,000 you initially put in at the end of 10 years. Here's the catch though. What if you need the money within 5 years? And the going interest rate at that time has gone up to 7%. Well, nobody's going to want to pay you $10,000 for that 5% bond when they can earn 7% on other bonds. So you have to sell the bond at a price that will make the annual return to the owner equal 7% per year, which means you have to sell your bond at a discount and take a loss. And then there's the fraud risk, the risk that someone is lying to you. Some investments are misrepresented. So it's important that you pay attention. So let's just stop there for a moment and talk about that fraud risk, because I am hopeful that you are all familiar with a Ponzi scheme. Bernie Madoff, who is was a criminal genius. Criminal is the important piece of this, but he was a genius. He managed to run a Ponzi scheme I think for almost 20 years before he got caught. He recently died in prison at, I think, the age of 79 or 80. But this is how this works. I get a hold of Maria and I say, oh my gosh, I've got this incredible deal for you. Shh, don't tell anybody because it's really important. No one knows. But I can get 26% interest. I just need a $20,000 investment. Well, Maria is thinking, oh my God, 26% interest. You bet. Let me go to the bank. And so guess what? She gets her return. You bet. I pay her those dividends out. But then she gets with her friend Gerardo and says, hey, I got this deal. They come to me and I go, oh, Maria. Nope. Remember, this was just for you. We can't let anybody else in. Oh, they beg. And so finally I relent. But this time, Gerardo's payment has to be higher than Maria's, and he's going to have to put in $30,000 to get that 26. And then when the same thing happens with Bernardo, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, let's be honest. There's nothing out there that can pay 26%. And if there was, there would be more people that knew about it. And if at the very least, I would not be sharing it with any of my friends. So this is exactly how Ponzi schemes work, because after a while, you see, I'm not investing any of it as the leader of this gang. I am buying a yacht. I'm buying a house. I'm flying to foreign countries. I'm having a great time. And pretty soon the beginning investors say, well, wait a minute, I'm not seeing that 26% anymore. Where's that dividend? And I go, oh gosh, the market is so difficult, but let me see what I can do. And then we get some more people involved. And pretty soon we have a huge big pool because I'm using the new people's money to pay the dividends to the people that have already been in this game with me. Does that make sense to everybody? Give me a thumbs up if you've got that Ponzi scheme, because it is the most often used scam, and people fall for it every day. So I'm hoping thumbs up that you're understanding a Ponzi scheme, because that fraud risk is huge. Thank you for the thumbs up, because it's scary. And I will tell you that sometimes it's older individuals. So if you've got moms and dads and grandpas and grandmas, you might be paying attention to what they're talking about. And sometimes it's young people. It's just the fact that truly, you've heard this a million times. If it sounds too good to be true, it is. So have to be careful about that. All right, let's move along. So we've got common savings products. You're familiar with these, I'm sure. Our savings accounts are what most people use, and they have a relatively low interest rate. But we can build this nice continuum. We can get so much already in our savings account, and then we can decide to buy a CD. That's a certificate of deposit. And this is a specialized deposit made at a bank or another financial institute. And you, as the saver, provide the bank the money for a specified time, usually several months or years. And as a bank, I offer to pay you more for the use of your money. And so the longer the maturity, the higher the interest rate you earn. But you have to leave it in the space for the agreed upon term. Otherwise, you pay a penalty. Then there's money market funds. Those are specialized funds that invest in extremely short-term bonds. They pay a slightly higher rate than a savings account, but usually less than a CD. And you have to keep a pretty high minimum balance. But you've heard of people who have money market checking accounts. So they're making some money on their checking accounts and having access to their funds. Series E bonds. We used to call them war bonds 100 years ago, so to speak, and they're issued by the federal government. The nice thing about Series E bonds is that they never lose their value. So you can buy them at half value. So you buy a $50 bond at $25, and then that interest builds up until it's worth the 50. This is a great opportunity to invest in your children if you have them. Lots of grandparents do it for their grandkids. Grandkids aren't that excited about it at the moment because it isn't a toy, but later in life, when they're going to college or wanting to buy a house, all of a sudden that bond seems pretty nice. So the problem with leaving your money in a savings account is that it's a low return. So let's look at our common investment products. Stocks, which of course represent a share of ownership in a company. So if you own a share of McDonald's or Apple or anything else, you're considered a shareholder or a stockholder. And you make money in two ways. The first is receiving a dividend. Not all companies choose to make their profits and turn them into dividends, but some do. Or you decide that when the company is profitable, it's time to sell and go on to something else. And then you make money off of the fact that you bought it when it was low and you sold it when it was high. And that's what we always like to do. Bonds, mentioned those before, could be a company or a corporation or a government that needs to borrow money, just like people do. So you're lending money to those companies or governments if you buy a bond. And as a bond investor, you pay a set amount of money. And then the issuer, like the government or a corporation, promises to pay it all back to you on a certain date with a set amount of interest. So it's a pretty safe. People suggest they call it a fixed income security because the amount of the income the bond will generate each year is fixed or set when the bond is sold. You always know in advance how much you'll be paid and how often, as well as when the original investment will be paid back. However, the longer, sometimes the airport needs to extend their construction and they can't pay you back in the time that you thought. And so suddenly you don't actually have that liquid piece and you're thinking, wait, I need that money now. Mutual funds allow people to invest in stocks and bonds without doing all the homework necessary to pick individual companies. So many organizations that you may find yourself employed by will offer you a 401k or a 403b. That's your access to a mutual fund pool where someone else is managing those funds, and you still do get to say to them on a yearly basis, you know, I want to be more risky with my choices. So let's look at investing in something else. So you do have some control over it, but you don't have to do the day-to-day management of it. And so that's sort of a nice way to get into the investment space. You can also go into gold, futures, collectibles that carry significant risk. So how do you get started? Well, the first thing is to think about what kind of a risk taker are you? And that's important for you to understand. When you join an organization that provides a 401k or a 403 or 403b, your portfolio manager will say, let's talk about your risk tolerance, because they're tied to certain investments. And so if you have a low risk, they're going to keep you more in a cash basis with some mutual funds, perhaps. If you're high risk, you might be going for technology or brand new companies. So once you've discovered your risk tolerance, then you have to decide what return or earnings you'd like to receive on your money and how liquid, how easily and quickly an investment can be converted to cash you want your investment to be. Then you can, armed with your knowledge, you can match the investment tool with your needs and objectives. So this is a risk pyramid. You can check it out on the internet. They all look the same, but we start with the lower risk and lower return are cash, bank savings accounts, bank certificate of deposit, bank money market accounts. Then we might move up the pyramid to government bonds. We might move up to stocks, bonds, and mutual funds. And we might move all the way to collectibles. And collectibles, and I'm not going to call you out, but there might be somebody in your family who has those tiny Beanie Babies that McDonald's gave out years ago, still in their plastic bags. I'm going to say, let them breathe. Take them out of their bags because no one wants them. What are collectibles? Well, they're things that you think will be highly a great investment because you'll get a great rate on your return, but then you have to find a purchaser who believes the same as you do. You're just the seller and you can say, yeah, these Beanie Babies are worth millions. Until you can find a purchaser to pay you that, you're stuck with a lot of Beanie Babies in your closet. So take some time with this risk pyramid and sort of get a sense of it. Well, what are some keys to investment success? The first thing is to develop a plan, link it to your financial goals. We talk about diversification. We don't want all of our eggs in one basket. So it's nice to be able to get those mutual funds because that's that diversification. You might have some technology stock. You might have a municipal bond. You might have decided to buy orange juice. Then all of a sudden, the orange crop in Florida is decimated with an early freeze. Orange juice no longer makes any money. They've gone bankrupt, but you still got technology and you still got your bond. So you didn't get completely hosed as you would have if you had just done all orange juice. Invest for the long term. Do your research. It's fascinating when you look at a chart of the stock market. The stock market comes in at about 9 to 11% over time. Have some realistic expectations. We're not talking about day trading. And we talked early on about Bitcoin. I had a individual a few days ago who said, yeah, a couple of his buddies had invested in Bitcoin, Dogecoin. He hadn't gotten in on it, but he put in some money in it and he lost half of it. So, you know, what are your expectations about getting rich quick? Monitor the performance of your portfolio annually, not every day. That's not why you're in this. It's for the long term. We've talked about avoid too good to be true. And my last one is don't invest in something you don't understand. And I might add to it that you don't like. So I have people who pick their investments based on the fact that they only want to invest in a company that is all about the ecosystem. Somebody else wants to invest only in a company that is all about human rights. So think what it's important to you. Well, we're just about out of time, so let's recap. The sooner you begin saving and investing, the more wealth you will build. It's just that simple. It is important to evaluate and understand the risks and rewards of savings and investment options. And I'm going to encourage you to start slow. Get on the internet, look up young investors, high school and college students who are just beginning to understand the process. Absolutely getting on the bottom. Saving and investing can be achieved by anyone, regardless of income. So what's your personal financial wellness challenge this way? Well, consider the options available to you to PYF. How are you going to pay yourself first? Select one and act. Make a plan and establish and maintain an emergency fund. Increase your investment knowledge. I think there's one more handout that I just want to share with you real quick. And I know we're over time, but I believe that it's part of our packet. I could be making that up. But
you're correct. It's in there.
It is our 52-week challenge. And this is a great way to get started. I'm going to take 2 seconds to talk about it. This is just an example. You can create your own 12-week challenge or your 12-month challenge. But this is a way for you to say, yeah, I'm going to do this. So you'll notice that the first week you put in $1. Second week you put in $2. Now you could say to me, oh my gosh, CJ, like I'm not going to have $43 that I can put in a week. And I'm going to say, I get it. But maybe you get a birthday gift and it's actually week 13. Well, take some of that birthday money, pop it over into week 43. Doesn't have to be absolutely spot on, but look at the end of this. This doesn't even take into account compound interest. You could have over $1,000 saved. So find something that works for you. I've known a lot of individuals who have said, oh my gosh, this 52-week challenge is incredible. I'm going to do it. And they get pretty far into it if they don't complete it completely. So that's our challenge, is to be able to make savings a habit. Interested if I've met your goals this week, if you found anything that was of benefit, would love to hear from you, but I don't want to keep you too long because I know that it's time to go. Comments, questions, concerns? The crickets are back for Friday. Well, let me tell you what next week is. Next week is credit. So if you've got some burning issues around credit cards, loans, bring them next week so we can make sure that we hit the target. So my hope is it's thumbs up and you have a great weekend and that you got a lot out of today. Perfect.
Thank you, CJ. Thank you, students, for tuning in. Great job. With that, I'll officially end the session and wish you all a wonderful weekend. I'll see you next Friday.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thank you.